Welcome back to PixelPromenade Intersections, bridging boundaries, co-creating tomorrow. I'm Nico Marzian, your host. Thank you for joining. This episode is different from the ones before and the ones that will follow. A few weeks ago, I visited Hannover Messe, the long-running industrial fair in northern Germany. The visit gave me observations and thoughts, also some signals I want to share before continuing with the regular program. The reflections that came out of it connect to almost everything this podcast has been about, and they are worth a dedicated episode of their own. So let me take you with me, walk through what I saw, and then come back to what I think it means for the industrial and technological direction of Germany and Europe, and for the cross-boundary collaboration work this podcast keeps returning to. I have known Hannover Messe for most of my life. The first time I went, I was a small child. It was the mid-1980s. The fair was at its peak then, running over a longer duration than it does today, attracting numbers of visitors that today would be hard to imagine. CeBIT, the famous computer fair, was still an integrated part of it at that time, and shortly after was spun out into its own exhibition until it ended in 2018. What I remember most vividly is the sheer scale of it. Every exhibition hall was fully occupied. Booths, machines, equipment, tools, parts, products. Crowded with professionals from all over the world, with private visitors mixed in, with a density that made simply walking through the aisles a slow business. The outdoor area was enormous too, with utility vehicles on test tracks, massive cranes, all the things that would not fit indoors. One of the strongest memories is the Münchner Halle, the Munich Hall. For lunch or other breaks, visitors could go in there and find something like a Hofbräuhaus or a festival tent at Oktoberfest in Munich. Waiters carried huge portions of hearty Bavarian-style meals or half a dozen 1-liter beer mugs in each hand. Festival bands played typical alpine folk music, almost deafeningly loud, complete with yodeling as if their and everybody's life depended on it. The crowd, back then almost entirely male business people in suits and ties, and mainly from all over Europe, North America, Japan, but also other countries, clinking mugs, drinking without hesitation, sometimes standing on the tables and singing, while masses of more people pressed through the entrances and aisles, frantically searching for free seats amongst all the tables reserved for companies and delegations. This is not only the glorified memory of a then child. My father, who participated every year, has confirmed it. Others who were there in those years have too. That was what Hannover Messe was. The leading industrial fair of the country and the world that was at the time defining a substantial part of the industrial sector. I had not been back for a few years before this most recent visit, and the contrast was striking. Strangely and also unsettlingly, it was still mostly men to be seen at that fair for whatever reason. The demographics of who attended have barely shifted, even if it was a lot more attendance from China, Korea, India, and also South America or Arab countries than in much earlier years. A continuing trend over the past 10 to 15 years. What has shifted more significantly is everything else. The classic suits and ties were mostly gone, replaced by business casual or even casual attire, often combined with white or black sneakers, surely more comfortable than the dress shoes of 40 to maybe 10 years or so ago. The extreme masses were gone as well, when taking all the opened exhibition areas together and forgetting about concentrations around the most interesting parts. Not much more than 100,000 people spread over 5 days this time, according to the news reports, which would be around a tenth of the crowds during the most successful years. Many exhibition halls were closed. The ones with the lower numbers up until Hall 9 or Hall 10 were no longer in use for this fair. in the past being the center of everything together with the convention center. The outdoor area, once full of machinery and test tracks, now had a few food trucks and visitors enjoying a bit of warmth from the sunshine on the day I went. The Münchner Halle was apparently not even open, according to the exhibition map, where it was just grayed out. Economically, it would probably not make any sense to run it and hire all the staff for it with only such numbers of visitors. Inside one of the halls that were in use, the German army was more visible than I have ever seen at this fair. The topic of defense was quite prominently represented. I even came upon a booth by the Federal Intelligence Service of Germany, trying to attract potential staff. That clearly was a sign of the times that would have been almost unthinkable in earlier decades when the fair was defined by civilian industrial production. Many topics and technologies that had been presented prominently in the main halls for decades, such as rolling shutters for logistics ramps or production floor doors, to give just one specific example, were not visible anywhere I went. What was visible and dominant was robotics, and especially humanoid robots, and anything with artificial intelligence in the name. Clearly, many companies thought they had to present something around AI. Whether they had a clear idea about what they should do for it or what their customers would actually benefit from was a different question. Many did not. Imagery and animations used at the booths were often made visibly with generative AI as well. The presence of AI on a booth had become almost compulsory, like a wallpaper choice. Some booths carried it well, others not so much. Some had a much better grasp of what their products and services should look like with data, automation, and AI integrated. Siemens, for instance, attracted large numbers of visitors and was offering several guided tours around their impressive main booth at the same time to different visitor groups. I think that is the sign of a company that knows what it is presenting and why. Humanoid robots were walking, dancing, and interacting with people all around in some halls. Even German robotic startups had to show something of that kind. The dancing robots were a prominent feature, probably since they became hot topics for news outlets and on social media recently, driven by the latest technology trends coming from China. One presentation made a lasting impression on me, and not necessarily in a good way. A German company had humanoid robots performing what should have been a relatively simple task. Put some giveaway into a box, close the box, place it on a shelf. One robot specifically failed clearly while I was there. Apparently, some of the staff responsible for supervising the technology were trying to fix the messy process while the presentation continued to run. It was a bit uncomfortable to watch. Now, this could have been a temporary glitch. Equipment fails, which can happen to everyone. It could also have been the new fashion idealized in Germany of moving fast, developing quickly, and fixing things later. A posture borrowed from elsewhere and not always borrowed wisely. Or it might have been a confirmation of what many commentators in Germany have been saying for years, that the country is no longer able to keep up at the technical frontier, never mind defining the industrial world the way it once did. I do not know. One failed robot is not evidence of a national decline. But I would not have seen this kind of presentation with this kind of failure unrecovered in real time at Hannover Messe in the mid-1980s, I assume. Even during all the visits, as an adult professional myself, I did not observe something like that to such an extent. Not everything was discouraging. A few things genuinely lifted my mood at the fair. The space sector managed to present itself a lot more prominently than it has done at this fair in the past. And it attracted a highly interested professional audience. That is consistent with what episode 10 of this podcast described. New space is becoming a real industrial sector with European participation that has been growing visibly. Hannover Messe is starting to reflect that, which is appropriate. I would be happy to see it grow even a lot larger though. Chinese industrial companies surely will continue to take over the lead in many areas. What a much higher number of very well-made company presentations also were able to show in Hannover this time. What a difference to the typical Chinese booths 10 years or so ago. I have to say that I find that development as intimidating from a European standpoint, as much as I find it impressive and inspirational as a person who loves progress and outlooks of the future waiting for us, as well as one who has deep emotional and intellectual ties with the country, the Chinese people, and culture. The Siemens example I mentioned is worth holding on to. So was the not much smaller booth of SEW Eurodrive with their AGVs and other robotic exhibits, or Festo with their newest take on bionics, also some others. There are still German and European companies that know what they're doing and present themselves with confidence and competence. The question is how many of them, and at what scale, and whether they can carry the broader weight that a former leader in industrial production needs to carry to maintain its position. Maybe there's also such robotic startups with not so smoothly running presentations like the one mentioned, who will bring important parts of the highly needed change. This was not the once world greatest industrial show which was defining the story of the manufacturing world. It was still interesting here and there. The conversations I had with individual exhibitors were valuable. But I left Hannover Messe 2026 with an uneasy feeling, and the feeling is something I want to be honest about. Most of the booths that were most visibly confident about a coherent industrial future, with data, automation, and AI integrated into actual products and services that customers would buy, were not the booths of Western companies. They were, in a striking number of cases, the booths of East Asian companies, particularly Chinese ones. That observation comes with caveats. A fair is a showcase. What looks confident at a booth is not always confident in operations. National stereotypes do not capture the full picture. And yet the pattern was visible enough, I would say. My belief, and this is where the framework this podcast has been introducing comes into play, is that Germany, and more importantly, the EU as a whole, has a great deal to offer to continue defining the industrial world and living well from it. The widening from German to European is key from my personal point of view. Single national efforts are no longer the right scale for what the situation requires. We also must work against the urge to put one's own nation first. An intelligent and fair division of responsibilities is needed and unavoidable, as is systematic and synergetic partnership with other regions and especially our friends out there, should we as a middle power region want to be successful in the future too. What this does not happen with, and what was clearly missing at the booths of Western companies I saw, is a common and future-oriented grand vision or two. There were product roadmaps. There were demonstrations of incremental improvement. There were AI add-ons. There was not, in any visible way, a coherent narrative about what European industry is for in the coming decades, what it is building toward, and what coordination across countries, sectors, and disciplines it would take to get there. The visions I saw, by contrast, were at the East Asian booths. Coherent stories about manufacturing transformation, about energy and mobility integration, about what the industrial future will look like and what role their companies will play in producing it. This is where Hannover Messe meets the work this podcast has been about. The grand industrial vision is not produced by any single company on its own, nor by any single ministry, nor by any single research institute. It is produced by coordination across all of these, in conditions that allow long-term thinking and that protect serious cross-boundary work from short-term commercial pressure. The four pillars I have been describing through these episodes are exactly the architecture that would allow that kind of coordination to happen and to hold over time. CoLab as the shared environment where companies, public institutions, research bodies, and civil society can work together on shared challenges. People in the middle as the human function that holds such cross-boundary work together, week after week, year after year, across changes of leadership and political cycles. Applied data intelligence as the layer that lets a continent see itself, see what it is building, see where it is succeeding and where it is falling behind. Exchange of value as the mechanism that makes contribution to such a vision rewarding, not only for the dominant players, but for the smaller actors whose participation is essential. Hannover Messe in 2026 is, in a sense, a snapshot of an industrial ecosystem that has been operating without the architecture I have been describing. Individual companies do well. The institutions hold what they can. The fair itself continues for now. But the larger coordination, the grand vision, the cross-boundary collaboration that would let European industry reposition itself for the coming decades, is not happening at the scale and intensity it would need to. That is a structural observation, not a comment on effort or talent. The effort is there, the talent is there, while the coordination architecture is not. So, if you work in the European industry, in research, in public administration, in any of the sectors that fed into what Hannover Messe used to be, the question worth looking into is whether you are participating in a coordinated effort to define what comes next, or whether you are doing good individual work in a system that has lost its larger story. Both are possible. Knowing which one you are doing matters. If you work in the institutions that could hold a renewed European industrial vision, the European Commission, the major research institutions, the standards bodies, the industry consortia, the question is what each of you would need from the others to make a coherent narrative possible, and to make it not just a narrative, but a coordinated program of work over the coming 15 or 20 years. If you are watching from outside Europe, including from the East Asian context where the confidence I described at the fair was so visible, I take the confidence seriously. It is earned by sustained, coordinated effort. It is the kind of effort that the European framework I propagate would aim to enable on our side of the world. The competition is real, and it is welcome, but it is also a wake-up call. In the next episode, we return to the regular program. We turn the lens around and start examining the framework itself, with the question, where does it not apply? That episode was already in preparation when I went to Hannover Messe, and it will follow as planned. But the visit shaped how I think about the urgency of the framework. The work matters more than I had been describing it. The walk through 40 years of changes at Hannover Messe in one afternoon made that very clear. Thank you for watching. Take care. And until next time, goodbye.